Hello, this is Bobby Chasnis, Director of Pure Michigan Business Connect. Joining me today is Duc Nguyen Abrahamson, who serves as the Executive Director of the Asian Pacific American Chamber of Commerce. Today, we're going to be discussing the work that Duc's organization does throughout the state, along with the impact that supplier diversity programs and efforts have on local communities, economic resiliency, and even businesses' bottom line. Duc, welcome to the live stream. Could you briefly give us a little bit of information about the Asian Pacific American Chamber of Commerce and how you work with our program?
Thanks, Bobby. Yes, this year APAC actually celebrates 20 years of facilitating business relationships among Asian-owned and US-based companies and promoting the economic advancement of the Asian American Pacific Islander. So APAC acts as a collective voice for 30 plus Asian and Asian Pacific countries. We often work with PMBC to find opportunities for minority-owned suppliers.
Awesome. Thank you. Welcome. Really to kick it off, I think we can just talk, a little bit about the prevalent challenges that you've seen, both on the supplier side, but also on the buyer side, as a result of the COVID pandemic and supply chain disruption. So could you talk to us a little bit about the challenges you might have seen?
Well, I think many suppliers and buyers have been dealing with these issues for some time now. The impact of COVID on manufacturing and production logistics alone, providing a safe workplace, adding additional space for distancing, including a shift for disinfecting between shifts, and the disruption in resources in manufacturing. Many of APAC's members who have factories overseas have been dealing with this since December of 2019. So the events of the last year and recent events, even the disruption of the global supply chain has shown buyers their need to diversify and not be dependent on one source.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. They're almost, it's almost like becoming COVID veterans at this point. It's been over a year and a half. They're getting used to it and kind of seeing more about what they need to do to change and maybe some of the things that they can do to hold on to some of the safety requirements that they've seen.
Yeah, well, not just that, but let's look at some of the recent events. So the severe weather in Texas in late January and early February. In Texas, you have major industries, the semiconductor manufacturing, oil and gas, petrochemicals, food, agriculture, aerospace and defense, and a bunch more. Plus, it's a major transportation hub. Highways, railways run through the state, connecting it and Mexico and other parts of the US. So those disruptions are intensified by the fact that the supply chain is already fragile from COVID.
Yeah, for sure.
What is that? Ever Given. It's stuck in the Suez Canal for almost a week. So that's disrupted the supply chain, and we will be feeling that for some time. It was blocking 10% of the global traffic, the shipping traffic. So, for instance, European manufacturers who were waiting for a part from Asia may need to pause their production completely while waiting for a single part to arrive. And that disruption can have a ripple effect through the world economy. So we might not have been waiting for a part from Asia, but we were waiting for a part from Europe, and their production was disrupted, so our production will also be disrupted. There's this ripple effect that's going to affect us from these, minor inconveniences that disrupted 10% of the global shipping traffic.
Yeah.
So it's like diversifying your supply chain source is really important. It's like your investment portfolio. Diversify. Some of APAC's members have been able to thrive and grow in the last year because they saw the need to fill these gaps that these disruptions have created. Or some of the buyers, even because their supply chain has been disrupted, were sought out these diverse suppliers to fill in their gaps.
That's a good point that I wanted to maybe touch on a little bit more is kind of that innovative supply chain thought process that maybe comes from the buyers and suppliers. You know, on the buyer side, they may be looking to different industries to fulfill their supply chain that they haven't before, you know, specifically manufacturing. We see a lot in the automotive market and the aerospace market of crossover because some of the capabilities are markedly the same. Have you seen a lot of that kind of crossover? I mean, obviously, for professional services and other service type commodities, it's different. But have you seen a little bit of that, of buyers maybe going into other types of industries searching for supply chain assistance?
I don't know about crossing over, but I know that some of the supply chains have found new opportunities that way, and they've crossed over themselves. Again, it's about resources. I think when you deplete one resource, you're always going to try to find where you can find that next resource, that next supply chain. So I think the minority suppliers were already there. They already had their resources and they were already there. They may not have been utilized to their capacity. And that's where a lot of the corporations were like, hey, the demand is still there. We still need these things. We need to move forward, even through COVID. These are the things that we need. How are we going to fulfill these demands? So they're going to, you're going to look, if it's just like, when you went to Meijer last year in March and you couldn't find any toilet paper, you went to the dollar store. You went to look for places where you would not have looked for toilet paper in the past, and you might find it. So the same thing. You're just looking for new resources. Where are you going to find it, and who can help you?
Yeah, and I think on that point, you know, a lot of the suppliers, especially in Michigan, have kind of either retooled or innovated their offerings to try to assist other industry verticals. And I think, from what you said earlier about the Suez Canal and, the compounding effect of these supply chain disruptions, I think another portion of that is talent, right? Is finding the right individuals to get back to work, or finding replacements for individuals that maybe had to move on, or even, even move out of the state. Have you had, any feedback from your, organization about finding talent, or is this still a large issue?
Yeah, finding talent is still a large issue. I think that not only I think COVID has an effect to that as well. The manufacturers aren't able to be at full capacity, but even with the capacity that they're able and allowed to have, they still can't find people to work. So, the unemployment rate might be high, but there are jobs and opportunities out there. You just have to look, or you just have to want to go back to work too. There's always that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, hitting off of that point, this past year has been extremely tough. Maybe we can get into maybe some of the wins that you've seen from buyers and suppliers, or if you have, any specific examples of suppliers that maybe have had a positive experience that they had shared throughout the pandemic.
Well, I think that I touched upon it a little before as well. Some of my members have been dealing with COVID since December of 2019. So they've had to work around dealing with quarantine, masks, disinfecting, downsizing their shifts, social distancing their factories, and they did all of that overseas. So when last year around May, June, when people were starting to think, okay, how are we going to get back to work? A lot of my members were already ready. They already had a plan that they saw worked overseas that they were just going to bring to their factories here and implement them. So a lot of them were ready and rearing to go when things opened up. So they were, off and running when available and being safe about it. But COVID has been resilient as well. So, I do hear stories where even with social distancing, mask and cleaning at the workplace is safe, But when you leave the workplace, where are you going? Who are you in contact with? And when you come in, when you come back to work, what are you bringing in with you? I've had a member where I think everybody within his office had COVID at one time. They would quarantine for 2 weeks and then come back, and then somebody else would get it, and you didn't know. You didn't know for those 2 weeks, so you don't know what to do. I think COVID went through the entire office. Everybody had COVID. So I think a lot of people are looking forward to the vaccination, being able to go back to work safely.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think it's just the fear of the unknown, right? And not knowing what's next or how long this could last. I think that's been a huge impact, especially on supply chains. Going back to that is without knowing what the future holds. The next 6 to 8, even to 12 months. That's another, I guess, key cog in the supply chain disruption in affecting order numbers. New, I guess, fulfilling new parts. And just maybe some companies wanting to be more innovative, having to shift some of that budget away from, some of their innovation and R&D departments into HR and ensuring that the workplace is a safe environment for folks to get back into.
Absolutely. But I think the shift is also thinking about how we can protect our supply chain. What needs to be done to protect that supply chain? I mean, not just the events of last year, but just the beginning of this first quarter, we've felt the disruption. So what do we need to do as a corporation to look at our supply chain, and how do we make sure that these minor supply chain disruptions don't have this huge rippling effect? Do we have to think about stockpiling, or do we need to think about diversifying, or do we need to think about, what are the things that we need to think about, and how can we control the things that we can't control?
Yeah, and I think the minority suppliers, obviously wanting to localize the supply chain to kind of avoid some of these big hiccups. The minority suppliers have shown that higher level of resiliency, and really, I think some of that comes from some of the big players or major corporations realizing that building on their supply chain locally has a major impact on the communities that they serve and the communities that they're a part of. I think it's been really, it's been positive, and it's shown some optimism a little bit to see some of those big wins coming from, mentoring, some of the smaller suppliers along the way, and not just focusing on big business, right? The small to medium-sized companies are some of those companies that are probably in the most of need.
Yeah, and absolutely. I think those smaller businesses are what's getting us through through all of these disruptions.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think going back to one of the programs that PMBC launched in the early days of the pandemic, our retooling grant, we awarded 12 companies to continue to produce PPE that had never produced PPE before. And I think, most of those companies were small to medium-sized manufacturers, but the impact is really, really largely felt, across the state. And I think it goes to show that while some of the smaller to medium-sized businesses may not have the scaling capacity to do so right off the bat, they're certainly more than willing to learn anything that they need or to be brought up to speed so that they can become a bigger part of that supply chain. So I think we absolutely appreciate everything, not only the diverse suppliers do, but organizations like yourself do to raise those up and give them a spotlight.
I think that the key word last year was pivoting.
Yes.
And because these smaller businesses have the agility to pivot quickly, that they've been able to answer the needs so quickly and so fast.
Absolutely. Yeah, pivot. That is definitely the buzzword from the last 12 to 18 months or so. And actually, that gives another kind of a segue into what we have done, as economic development organizations and as event hosts. It's been something that PMBC has had to do, and largely you've had to do. You mentioned it earlier. A lot of the networking events that we host, we had to move completely virtual in some cases less than 24 hours, right? I mean, our agriculture summit, we had to move completely virtual. I was set to speak on stage, and we actually had to remove that completely. So I think it goes to show that not only the suppliers, but it's a big team effort, and everybody has to be on the same page to be able to still offer up those opportunities or be open to having meetings virtually instead of in person, and being patient on the virtual network, and getting comfortable and familiar with every virtual program there is out there.
Yes. I mean, with APAC, our last event last year was in March. So it was actually the last event. Right after our event, it was our East-West Business Connection, which is our supplier diversity conference. And right after that event, everything shut down. And we just had it again this year, and it was a virtual event. And prior to the virtual event, we actually had to do little webinars in regards to how to network virtually, what to do when you're meeting virtually, and how do you move your connections that you meet on a virtual conference to a real life business connection. I think, again, pivoting, trying to figure out how to network virtually, how to make these business connections virtually, how to actually connect with somebody virtually. It is the difficulty right now. But I think because we've been doing this for this past year, people are at the ready. They're pivoting. This is going to go on for some time. And even when we go back to face, there will be aspects of this. I think just like our right now, this interview being online and virtual and giving these opportunities for people to view it. I don't think that this is going to go away.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I think we're all relearning, I guess, a little bit of how to network in a different environment. And it's not all bad. We can be a little bit more optimistic about this because, being in a virtual environment does offer up some different opportunities. Obviously, for those that maybe are in the Upper Peninsula and wanted to attend an event, down here in Southeast Michigan, I think the virtual environment lends them the ability to do so, and having this kind of experience in a virtual environment can give them a leg up, and get them more prepared to meet with a buyer or have those serious conversations where in person just might not be as possible.
Yeah. And I think this also gives opportunities for those small businesses to go global, to have a farther, bigger reach. With APAC, we cover the entire state of Michigan. We have members in Chicago and Ohio. But I think this past year, we've extended our reach and our membership, and made connections with other Asian chambers in other states as well.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's another kind of a good segue is I think it's opening up different opportunities that, we wouldn't have normally seen before. And I think as kind of a state in general, I think everybody's kind of taking an inside look at what opportunities they might have that they can offer up to, minority suppliers to build that resiliency, but also, what other partners have we not identified before that may be a good opportunity to start involving now. I think it's been a little bit of, some trying times, not without its challenges, but we're certainly looking back on the upswing and looking to collaborate more kind of as not only as a state, but regionally as well.
Absolutely.
So I think, the next little bit, I wanted to talk really about, just supplier diversity programs, impacting local communities, businesses' bottom lines. A little bit I wanted to mention about the process of getting certified, and what does that process look like through APAC or through one of your partners that does the actual certification? Could you clarify, does APAC do that, or is there a third party?
No, APAC doesn't do certification. Usually we point to the Minority Supplier Development Council or other certifying entities. We don't do that personally. And the reason we don't do that is because we don't want to restrict you from getting our services because of you not being certified. You not being certified right now does not mean that you don't have those opportunities. You open up those opportunities and you see the reasons why you need to be certified, and then you go in that direction. So we want to make sure that we're showing those opportunities. We're helping the Asian community, business community, see and find those opportunities. And if they do need to get certified, they can. But we always definitely encourage people. There's more opportunities when you do get certified. APAC is here to show you what those opportunities are.
Perfect. Yeah, and I think what is also nice about kind of what we do as programs working together is PMBC on one side starts to identify buyer demand, and specifically working with larger corporations that maybe have a little bit more robust supplier diversity programs. I think that's one way that I wanted to mention. Is that we frequently work together, to put together pitch competitions, virtual meetings, things of that nature, to ensure that our buyers are meeting with, capable and vetted suppliers, both from your organization and other supplier diversity organizations.
Absolutely. I think you have a question.
Yes, I see that. So the question is, how can I get in touch with PMBC for additional support? Feel free to go to our website, which is michiganbusiness.org/PMBC. And there are some contact us buttons down at the bottom of that page, and you can totally submit those. And one of our members from our team can reach out to get you in touch with the correct person who needs. And please, if there are any other questions, go ahead and put them in the comments, and we can try to address those as they come in. All right, Duke. Well, this is towards the end of some of my questions. Did you have anything that you wanted to cover specifically or talk about APAC or any of your members?
Well, I wanted to talk about the impact of supplier diversity. And I pulled up some numbers, and they're huge numbers. So I wanted to make sure that I bring this up. So the National Minority Supplier Development Council released their facts and figures for 2020. And that they showed that the economic impact of the minority business enterprises was more than $400 billion in economic output, much of which is reinvested in local communities. So these businesses are also responsible for more than 2.2 million jobs. So generating about $138 billion in salaries and benefits. So minority suppliers are generating close to $49 billion in tax revenue for local, state, and federal governments. So these numbers are only MBEs certified by NMSDC. So we're not including the non-certified MBEs, women-owned, veteran, disabled-owned. These numbers are just a small picture of the economic impact created by the diverse suppliers. So I wanted to make sure that I included those numbers in our discussion because those were a big impact in our economy.
Absolutely, and I think those are great numbers. Thank you so much for sharing, because I think it lends to kind of the service that those minority-owned suppliers give, not only to communities, but the state, regional, all the tax base that they have. And frankly, I mean, they're part of all of our communities as well, and I think we can do our best to kind of build them up and support them wherever they may need, because we know how big of an impact they have for everybody, really, throughout the state and throughout the country.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Duke, for joining me today and sharing with us a little bit about APAC and hearing your industry insights. And thank you so much for everyone who tuned in today. Like I said earlier, if you need to reach out to Pure Michigan Business Connect, you can find us on the website at michiganbusiness.org/PMBC. Duke, if you have your website that you would like to add in, please feel free.
Yes, you can find the Asian Pacific American Chamber of Commerce at apacc.net.
Awesome. Well, thank you all again for attending, and please reach out with any questions, but looking forward to the discussion next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.